taking out my phone, not to text anybody or check Twitter right now, but my homily notes are on here. So, as I had said just briefly at the beginning, my name is Father 20, just like the number, easy to remember. And I was just recently reassigned. I've come from the last 3 years. I've been a priest for 4, but the last 3 years I was at Holy Cross in Batavia, about an hour south. And I just started a week ago as the new spiritual director for Marion Central Catholic High School. And one of the things that a lot of people have been asking me as I start as the spiritual director there at Marion Central is, what do you do all summer? Nothing. Hence the scruffiness, it's the kind of time I can do that. I can get away with it. But so I'm going to be the spiritual director for Marion Central Catholic, so I'm very excited about that. I know there's a lot of families here who send their kids there. We have a lot of alumni here. But then on the weekends, I have to have somewhere to say Mass. So you'll see me here quite a bit. I'm kind of a little bit of a freelance, just kind of the rent-a-priest for the various priests around. But home base is St. Thomas here in Crystal Lake. Actually, there might be some people in this parish who might know me as Mr. 20 because 10, 11 years ago, for 1 year, I taught 6th grade band right over at Bernodus Middle School. So there might be some people who might remember me as that. When I found out that I was coming here to St. Thomas and I knew that your new pastor was going to be Father Evans, I was a little disappointed at first because, see, in my former assignment, I was the short preacher. I had the really fast homilies. Now, you'll get to know this about Father Evans. Father Evans, his homilies, very memorable, always right to the point, and usually about 3 minutes long. So I was feeling kind of bad about that until I remembered that your other priests are Father Kupnit and Father Simon. So I think I'm going to be okay. I'm still going to be on the shorter end. So just a brief story about my buddy Matt. My buddy Matt is my best friend from college, and he and I were on the same track in life. We were both going to be musicians, and then I obviously went a totally different path, and we were actually going to go out to live in Los Angeles together. Last moment I decided, you know what, I don't want to do that, I want to go be a priest, but he did. So he's a professional musician out in Los Angeles. He's won 2 Grammys. He's got this wife who's involved in acting and producing movies and stuff, kind of low-key stuff, but still they're making their way out there in LA, and they just had their first baby. They got married 3 years ago, and just a day or 2 before Father's Day, they had little Quinn Avery is his name, a beautiful little baby boy. And I was talking to Matt after, just talking to him on the phone about this new child that they had. And he said, the crazy thing is everything, and parents will know this, everything changed overnight, immediately. I'm an entirely different person now. I just want that kid to know that I'll do absolutely anything for him whenever. Everything in my life, all my thoughts, every waking breath, every moment is for that little boy. But he doesn't even know it yet. It's going to take him years before he starts to become aware that that's how much love I have for this little kid. In our first reading today from the Book of Wisdom, there's an interesting line. We hear that God formed man to be imperishable. God formed man to be imperishable. It's interesting because the author of the Book of Wisdom, we think, kinda, sorta, was writing about 50 years before the birth of Christ. He's a Jewish philosopher in what's called the diaspora, meaning that after the Jewish people, a lot of them had been exiled, then they kind of spread around the area. Not all of them remain in the Holy Land. So this Jewish philosopher is in exile. He's in a land that's not his people's own home territory. And he's contemplating God, and it's in this moment of kind of a place of despair and desperation, recognizing that God does not desire death, but he has created me to be imperishable. As Christians, sometimes we can have a little bit of our Christian faith that can sometimes get mixed and tainted with a little bit of the thoughts of the world. I think sometimes Christians, we want to have a good positive self-esteem. Nobody wants to be down on ourselves. And so we think back to, back in the day, if you look at Christians maybe in the stuffy medieval Middle Ages era, that they had no self-esteem. They only thought of themselves as sinners, didn't really recognize the love of Jesus in their lives. And so sometimes we make the understandable mistake of assuming God loves us because we're awesome. We're great. We really got everything figured out, and that's why God loves us. I've got a good job, my family's doing well, my kids, they graduated and they've got jobs now too, and so we did a good job, so God loves us. That's not Christian truth. That's not the gospel. The Christian truth is difficult at first to listen to, but when we understand it, is far deeper, far more beautiful, and far more uplifting. From the moment God thought of you in all eternity, millions of years before you even came into existence, God formed you to be imperishable. God wanted to spend happily ever after with you from the moment he thought of you. We see this played out in this story of Jesus and this little girl. Jesus wants to bring her back to life, but he doesn't do it in such a way that's flashy. He doesn't want to put on a show. He's not trying to prove to everyone else beyond a shadow of a doubt in this moment that he is Lord of Lords. He wants to show some of his apostles so they can tell the story, brings in Peter, James, and John, and then the girl's family, but kicks everybody out. That's not what's going on here. It's not about some flashy show that Jesus wants to show his strength and his power. Rather, he loves this little girl. And it's interesting that in the gospel, we get the translation. Why? Why does Mark decide that we need to know that Jesus said the words, Talitha koum? Because then right after that it says, which means, little girl, I say to you, arise. Why? Why is that important? Because that phrase, Talitha koum, was a very informal, loving, daddy kind of way of waking up his child. Talitha koum means, honey, wake up. Get up. It's time for a new day. That's the intimacy with which Jesus encounters this little girl, the way in which he wants to wake up his child. We're constantly tempted to doubt the teaching of the book of wisdom. When things aren't going our way, when somebody cuts us off on Randall Road, when we're sick, whether in little ways or big ways, when we've really messed up and we have regrets or we have guilt, or we have suffering in our family or ourselves or death around us, we doubt. We think that God made death, that he's just laughing at us or wants it to be this way. And the book of wisdom's teaching that he created us to be imperishable seems like a nice platitude but not really applicable in my life. We think that sin and suffering and death have the last word. But think of Quinn, this little boy that my buddy Matt just has now. His dad loves him so much, but he doesn't know it. He doesn't know it, but he is loved. Not only that, he knows it not in his mind, but bodily, right? As a baby, he experiences the bodily care, the physical care of his mom and his dad. I'd like to use that as an analogy for our relationship with God. A lot of times we can go into the adoration chapel and pray, and we've got something we want to say to God, and we believe by faith that he's there, but we just don't feel it. Or you come to Mass, and you're receiving the Eucharist, and maybe you got your mind on something else, or maybe you're struggling and suffering in your own life that you're not really listening to God, but you know by faith that he's actually taking care of you in a real bodily way when you receive the Eucharist. A lot of times God is there present, taking care of us without our knowing it, just like that baby Quinn. When you're experiencing that kind of doubt or despair, when you might think that your sin or your mistakes or your suffering has the last word, remember that those things don't have the last word because they never had the first word. The first words in your existence from all eternity are, let us make them in our image, as the Holy Trinity contemplated and brought you about into existence. Sin and suffering and death don't have the last word because they never had the first word. Jesus has the last word. And so we can always hear in our own prayer. We should try to listen and hear like Jesus said to that little girl 2,000 years ago, whenever we're despairing, whenever we're frustrated, whenever we're angry, whenever we feel like all is lost, Talitha koum, honey, sweetie, wake up.